We might be one of the very few speakers here today that are not pure insurance, but I think we can make this relevant to most people in the insurance space. So we focus on legal tech and business process modeling, both of which are near adjacent to the blockchain space. To the blockchains and insurance. Just quickly, my company, Monax, we were the first to market with a permissionable blockchain, which is now known as Hyperledger Burrow. We've built a whole range of smart contract systems over the last 4 years, since 2014 when we started. What we're going to talk about today is just quickly talk about Hyperledger Burrow, an EVM that is extensible and used in a bunch of different use cases. And then really we want to talk about the meat of what we're here to talk about today, which is Blackstone business process modeling engine built completely in Solidity. So first, Hyperledger Burrow. It is a permission blockchain client. It is the oldest Ethereum derivative permission blockchain client. It leverages a Tendermint consensus engine, a permissions layer, and secure natives framework that allows you to build native code in Go, and then has a build-to-spec EVM on top of it. Along with that, we have a whole range of inbuilt tooling that allows you to easily configure your chains, to deploy extensive and sophisticated systems of smart contracts, and then monitor your chains as they're going. How we think about Burrow, and this is just a few seconds about Burrow before we really get into the meat of it, but how we think about building systems is to make it really easy for developers to get up to speed. So Burrow is distributed as a single binary distribution. This stands in contradistinction to some of the other Hyperledger frameworks, almost all of which now run in EVM, which is relevant for this week, of course. And the other frameworks are much more sophisticated in terms of how they have a whole range of bells and whistles. Burrow has a few bells and whistles, but it's really built to be a single, off-the-shelf, fast, simple, and easy to use blockchain client that's really built for process-heavy use cases, which is really what we're here to talk about today. So with that out of the way, I really want to turn over to Monax's Chief Product Officer, Hendrik, who is going to talk about Blackstone.
Hey everyone. So, hello again. I am going to speak about this project called Blackstone. That is the open source portion of a larger project that we're working on at Monax called the Agreements Network to record and operate legal agreements on a blockchain. And the key word is operate, because in a lot of cases, we've been building one-off solutions, POCs, for a long time, based on blockchains and the Ethereum virtual machine, and having to throw away a lot of code every time is always an issue. So we started a while ago implementing BPM routines on top of the blockchain to have a higher reusability and abstraction layer around processing. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that we did, go into a little bit detail, and leave some Q&A at the end. So I'm going to skip this and go right into it. So what BPM looks like and has looked like for the past 20 plus years that the discipline has been around is that every company builds their processes out inside the company, and this when cross-company processing needs to take place, there are technologies. We can use web services, message bus, a lot of things to make or enable the communication between companies. And early on, this is what drew me to Monax as a company, is that we saw blockchains as the perfect tool really to synchronize on data between different actors that don't necessarily trust each other. So instead of having each silo with duplicated data, because when I call your company and send you a copy of my data and ask you to please process it, if I don't hear back from you after 3 days, I typically have to pick up the phone, or I model escalation routines into the business process, how to handle delays and everything else. So with blockchain technology, there is the now a possibility to say, let's partially outsource or pieces of our business processes into a shared substrate, and use that as the common layer for processes that have to cross organizations. And this means that we don't want people to throw away their investments into their in-house BPM systems, but we're proposing to, as basically an exercise in business process improvement, to take portions of the business processes and outsource it, especially the data that we share anyway. So instead of calling a web service, why don't we make that a transaction on a blockchain so that you can see it, everybody else who's involved in the same process can see it and has access to the data. In principle, I hope that makes sense. This is really what happens at the core, what we've built out. We have taken a state-of-the-art business process modeler that produces XML files that follow a industry standard called BPMN that has been around for a long time. That XML file is enriched with information that is relevant to the blockchain. So when you create in a flow diagram, typically you have swim lanes. Swim lanes represent the actors, both human resources or system resources in the system. If you want to run a business process on a blockchain, these actors are really boiled down to the public addresses in the case of Ethereum, because every actor has either is a human actor with an external account or is another smart contract. So that XML file can be parsed and is turned into a process graph, which is basically an adapted Petri net to keep track of where you are in the process, and then really you just run it, and everything is completely done in Solidity. So I have to say that the amount of code is not ginormous, but it is more than you would typically do on public Ethereum. Due to the gas costs in completely public blockchains, this is probably, I haven't tried it yet, but this is probably not runnable on public Ethereum because the gas costs and the gas limit are too high. So let's see. Doing business processes on the blockchain actually is a lot simpler than you think if you are used to business process management in organizational environments. Because what you normally buy for several $100,000, if you're a company, you go to Oracle, Microsoft, there are a couple of other big players. You buy a BPM suite that has an enormous wealth of integration possibilities because of the variety of legacy systems that you want to connect with. When you run a business process on a blockchain, there aren't that many things that you can do. So you can really do only 3 things, and that is you can create a task where the process stops and you need a human to do something, or somebody who is a member of your accounting department and therefore has the right to complete a certain step in the process and then say, I did this, let the process move forward. You can also invoke other smart contracts And when you invoke smart contracts, basically the distinction is twofold. Either you have a synchronous invocation of a smart contract that stays completely on-chain, or you invoke a smart contract that communicates with a system in the real world, so basically emits an event. And that third one is, I think, the most interesting type of activity in a business process, because we've been hearing a lot about oracles here at the conference. There are a lot more of these topics coming up. So the interesting part here is how easy it was for us to integrate oracles once we have the engine running, because at the point in the process where you want to call the oracle, it boils down to probably 5 lines of code, because the engine follows the description of the process model. So if you say, at this point in the process, I need to invoke a weather oracle to get the precipitation at this location on this date, you basically model the flow of data that is already in the process and say, call this oracle, and you get data back. And the cool thing about Ethereum-based contracts, the thing that is taken for granted a little bit too much, I think, sometimes, is the account-based infrastructure, so that you can have something like ownership. So your smart contract that communicates with the external oracle can be owned by somebody. So therefore, the person or the company that has the key to this smart contract gains the permission to communicate with the business process. And all it needs to do is pick up the events that this smart contract produces, call the weather oracle, and send the requested data back, and potentially get paid for it even. So these are screenshots from the business process modeler that we are using, where you can see the basic terminology of a business process is available for modeling. You have so-called gateways for decision making to say go left, go right. So here this is a super simple process to sign a rental agreement. In places like New York especially, you have to sign a lead paint disclosure. So the process really just says, I hope this is very readable for anybody who knows flow diagrams. You have the 2 swim lanes. The lower one is the tenant, and the tenant has to sign an additional disclosure if the building was built before 1978. So this flexibility that you gain from elevating process logic into a graphical environment that allows you then to say, for example, the tenant is linked to a field on another data structure where at execution time the engine expects to find a public key, so that it knows it needs to put a user task into a task list, basically, of somebody that is represented by an account on the Ethereum blockchain. So this is another example. These are examples from things that we do on top of this basic engine that I mentioned, the agreements network. So these are processes that we link to types of legal agreements. So in this case, this is an example for a rental agreement, but you can probably translate this to any processes that you have in the insurance space, where this is just a looping process that makes sure that 12 payments are received and recorded, so you have the audit trail. I'm going to stop for 1 second here, because anybody who knows business process management in the current business world knows that these processes can get extremely complicated and convoluted sometimes. And there is, of course, a danger here to do the same thing on a blockchain. And I think it takes a little bit of time here to learn or go through the same learning experience that you want to keep it sparse. the business process that is outsourced onto a blockchain to coordinate between multiple companies is supposed to really record the minimum amount of data and really make sure that the handover, like the process now it's in your court. I expect you to do something. Now we're calling an oracle. That these processes are not supposed to be as complex as what you run in-house, but they're combinable, because by using the same terminology and language that companies already have in their tooling in-house, it is much more seamless to say, I'm running the complex processes in-house. I don't have to throw them away, and I take one of these boxes that is an activity in my in-house process flow, and that is the handover to a process flow that runs on the blockchain. But it's not that I'm handing over to a business flow in another company, because having it on the blockchain allows everybody who's involved in this particular process to see where is it, who's working on it, and what is the state of the data. So the transparency is greatly increased. Before I hand over back to Casey, the things that we're showing you here is really, it's completely open source. You see the links here. This engine, we hope to invite people really to take a look at this. This is the culmination of over 2 years of work in our company that we've open sourced. A ton of code, especially Solidity code, is out there. And one thing that is really the outcome, or where it can make your lives easier, is I know a lot of people are still in the kind of let's try this out, let's do a proof of concept phase. So by being able to use a framework like this and model your process and not having to worry about the order in which steps are executed and make it easily changeable, you can concentrate on the actual business logic that you want to implement, and you simply plug it in to a process graph and make it executable. So it reduces really the amount of code you have to write and the time for a proof of concept or even a pilot to get running. But we're taking this into production, so this is not code that was created yesterday. With that, back to Casey. Thank you very much.
The reason that we think this is relevant for this conference is that insurance is all about processes. And it's all about processes and checking things and setting up those processes and the flows of those processes. And by leveraging Blackstone, this gives us an ability to do very quick proofs of concept in a graphical modeler and other extensive systems. So as Jan said, we're going to production probably in a number of weeks, something like 6 weeks with the agreements network, that is leveraging this to do legal process modeling in terms of how legal contracts fit. And if that is interesting for you, the legal tech side of this is obviously also near adjacent to the insurance side, but we're not really here to talk about that today. If you'd like to know more, feel free to go to agreements.network or find one of us. And we're happy to talk about, to give you a demo to show how this flow works. But we really think that this is a system that is a good framework for extensibility and for really low-code solutions for a range of process-heavy use cases. So thank you very much.
That is also one of the great stories in the Ethereum community. Last year, I sat together with Jan and in D1Conf 3 in Cancun, and we talked about business process, and I said to him, well, actually what we need is a business process engine. Can you build one? And now, 1 year later, we didn't talk any work in the last year. He's there, and it's finished, it's there. You can use it, and we will use it. Because last week we sat together in Minsk with our development team, and we were actually discussing how we can organize our workflows, because in insurance, as you know, we have complex workflows, and we still hard code those workflows. And having such a business engine is for us opening a complete door. Yeah? And so I'm really excited. Thank you very much. And I'm very sure we are one of your pilot users and integrating this in the generic insurance framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.